You're not ready for me to start yet, though, right?
No, you're good.
So
Good
the audience
afternoon.
here?
Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're broadcasting live from Park City, Utah, where I am. And my friend John is in Nevada, I believe you are. Or you could be anywhere in the world, but probably in Nevada, right?
Yes.
Yep. So thank you all for spending some time with us this afternoon. As you know, we know you're there, and we can't see or hear you, but we would encourage you to ask your questions through the chat box in the Q&A, and they're all most welcome. We have lots of people coming on today, and so if you wouldn't mind, as your questions come to mind, put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring them, and we'll get to as many as possible. So the subject matter today is super interesting and complex, but we're going to see if we can't frame it out so we get the meat of the matter. And if it's interesting to you, you can, as usual, follow up with John and get to the bottom of what he's doing in a more detailed fashion. We're going to be recording this and potentially posting it to the Family Office Insights YouTube channel. And perhaps John will post it on his website, which would be nice simply because we want to drive people's interest to John. If there's, at your experience today, if you feel like there's others that would be benefit from what you hear today, you're most welcome to include them in any conversation that you might have with John going forward. You don't have to worry about looping in Family Office Insights. You can just communicate, and we'll make that happen directly with John post-webinar.
It froze, Arthur. Oh, now you're back.
Yeah. I froze? Yeah. Was there a break in the conversation, John?
Yes, I got a message popped up that says the internet connection is unstable, which I don't know why that is, because it shouldn't be, but
well, it might be on my end, but I've got full bars. So if that happens again, just give me a heads up. Thanks.
Right.
I didn't see that. Okay, good. So Casey, thank you for letting us know. It looks good. So with that, we are super happy to have John. John and I have known each other and have had some very interesting, deep conversations about multiple things, including this project here. And I'm going to let John do his background simply because it's so involved and I'll get it all wrong. But he's got a long history of being in some very sophisticated businesses, and which is conducive to what he's doing here. And there's been a lot of work done in anticipation of launching this project. So again, if there's anybody that in your world that would benefit from hearing this, either through recording or of this webinar or talking directly to John, you're super welcome to have that happen, and we'll make sure everybody gets in touch. So John, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, start out with just giving a concise and background as it relates to how you got to. We're going to first talk about your background, then how you got to decide you wanted to do that. Is that all right?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
So take it away, John.
Well, thank you, Arthur, and thank everyone for taking the time to indulge me in this adventure. Personally, my background's in psychological operations mostly, so I consciously be thinking about how people think about things, and I was trying to think what's the best way to introduce myself to a new audience. Basically, I have several obsessions, and I think that's important because when I look at someone's participation, whether it's an operative, if my background's intelligence, or whether it's a business situation, what I'm really looking for is their intention and their commitment. Because we all know that everything tends to unravel in life, and success really is directly proportionate to people's ability to withstand the stress of change and various obstacles that come along. So I do think it's important to rattle on about myself a little bit, which I'm not too crazy about doing. It's kind of almost a conflict for me because in reality, when you work in the intelligence business, you kind of don't want to talk about yourself. So I was thinking, what would be the best way to provide you, because your job is to decide whether this is something that you would be interested and appropriate for you. And once again, fundamentally, it comes down to it's the who. Ultimately, projects change in dimension from time to time, but it's the who that you really have to depend on to make sure that the project reaches the finish line. So my background is in psychological operations. That was my specialty. I did my doctorate in it's a traditional philosophy doctorate, as opposed to the contemporary version where people do get a PhD in a topic. Historically, a doctorate was in philosophy because philosophy was the basis for life. Now, we've replaced that in modern times with psychology, and I'm not sure we did a very good job. The year I got my doctorate, the highest rate of suicides were of any professional group were psychiatrists. So that's not necessarily a good recommendation, is it? So I have a traditional philosophy background. And what I wound up doing in my career is focusing on sort of three obsessions. First obsession was, oddly enough, this was long before I was thinking about trading, was, how do events move through time? And my doctorate combined Jungian psychology and archetypes, which are the underlying principles of how the universe works, theoretically, and an ancient text called the I Ching, which is, Jung said, was the most important, most influential text in all his career. And I Ching is the book of changes, a very interesting and profound text that describes how events move through time. So this has always been kind of an obsession with me. My second obsession is, why do people do what they do? I've just always been fascinated by that, which of course why I wound up, in psychology. So in the world of psychological operations, I wound up focusing on what I call detecting deception, intention, and functionality, and when appropriate, influencing with integrity. That became my little buzz line when someone asked me, what do you do? Because people, if you look around the world today, you realize it's pretty crazy, right? And it's crazy for a reason. The reality is that the unconscious in a person is really controlling your life. Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. So what's really missing a lot in the artificial intelligence world, to kind of bring this back to topic, is that they're trying to do artificial intelligence based on just linear Descartes on steroids, cognitive processing, this, therefore that, this, therefore that, and so forth. In reality, life doesn't work like that. So this is one of the big failures in the artificial intelligence world. And I have lots of great quotes, great statistics on the fact that most of the AI projects aren't working. AI is brilliant and all of that, but it's not working for a reason. And the reason ultimately goes back to the fact it's really about understanding how the mind works more than writing code. So I come to this project. I eventually wound up focusing on AI because I was just fascinated with how the mind works and how events move through time. And something happened along the way, and it was my third obsession was, and I've got a great story about this because I'll tell the story first and I'll tell the punchline. So early on, I had the synchronistic opportunity to meet the father of computerized trading, a guy named Ed Sakota. It's kind of a fun story. I was living in Southern California, studying philosophy, working on my PhD, and I was writing orchestral synthesizer music and surfing my favorite break in Encinitas. So I come out of my meditation one day, and my mother's supposed to arrive. My wee country mom is supposed to arrive. It's our birthday. So I see this big red limo parked along the bluff. And I get the bright idea, why don't I go see if this guy will rent me his limo so I can pick up my mom at the airport. So I ring the buzzer. A guy sticks his head out the door or out the window and says, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'd like to rent your limo. Now, I'm a kid in my 20s, really. And he kind of laughs and said, well, I can't rent it to you, but I'll tell you what I'll do. So I got this great little red hat and a little red waistcoat, chauffeur outfit. I'll drive you to the airport and pick up your mom. Well, this was Ed Sakota, who, if any of you know trading world, Ed is really the father of trading, a wonderful guy. So I'm kind of happy about that. So he picks me up on the way to the airport. We're talking. He asked me what I do. And I said, well, I'm writing music. I'm writing orchestral music on my synthesizer. And back then it was before, I know it's a long story. I won't drag it on too long.
It's okay. It's okay. It's good.
All right. So I have this amazing synthesizer that the people who owned a house which I was living in, and they were bada bing, bada boom to my big Wagnerian orchestral music. And so they bought me the world's most sophisticated synthesizer. Paul McCartney had one. The big studios had one. And Little John had one, right? So I told Ed about this, and he was fascinated. He said, well, I'd really love to see this. He says, I like music. I write music too. And he said, my world is about using mainframe computers to trade with. Well, I had no idea what trading was. So Ed and I kind of hit it off. So here's the punchline to the story. It was a great event. So I'm showing Ed my Synclavier 2, my $40,000 synthesizer back in 1985 or whatever it was. And he's listening very carefully and very, very attentively. He says, I'll tell you what, let me show you something. He said, solo that violin track. So I soloed the violin track and played it. He said, now imagine that that's the US dollar. And I said, okay. I again realized I had no sophistication geopolitically or globally at that point. And he said, you notice that track that has integrity all by itself. All right. He says, now solo that cello track. So I soloed a cello track and played it. And he said, imagine that's the British pound. Okay. And that also has integrity by itself. I said, okay. He said, now play them together. So I played them together. He says, you see how the one track supports the other one, the cello supports the violin track. And you see how it also works against it sometimes, creates tension. He says, that's what the global markets do. He says, now play all the tracks. So I turned all the tracks on, hit the button, and all these tracks are playing. He says, what you're listening to is the global economy. You're listening to what all the human beings are doing on Earth in your little piece of music. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't totally get it, but I did know that what he said was important. And I think we all have these experiences when something happens that's profound. You remember what someone's wearing, you remember the feel in the room and so forth, but I remembered, wow, there's something important here. So that's
the smell, right? Your sense of smell has the best memory, right?
Oh, that's right. Exactly. I do remember the smell, So this was my first introduction to trading. And one of Jung's favorite concepts was the concept of synchronicity. I mean, for instance, when people invent things, they usually happen several places in the world at the same time. Great ideas proliferate. They come into our world. They have their own integrity. And so when you have these types of events, it's good to pay attention to them. And I did that a lot in my intelligence career. I learned to listen to that little voice. So that was my introduction to the concept of trading. And that gets to my third obsession. As time went on and I got interested in geopolitics and I got into the intelligence world and I was traveling and working in Russia and Ukraine and China and everywhere, I really started to pay attention to the economies. Because this is what Ed had triggered in me in that funny little opportunity. And what I saw more and more was the world of money and finance. It's like we've all seen the movie, I hope, The Matrix, right? Remember the screen on The Matrix where all the numbers are going by, and it's just abstract. But this is creation. This is our world. And it's not really language with the GPT model that everybody's so hot about. That's the best translation of human events. It's the economy. It's the numbers. So if you take all of the economies in the world, and if you combine them together, you have like this matrix screen where you really can see, and maybe you can't extract the data just yet, but you can see all of human behavior taking place. So this became my third obsession. Well, my fourth obsession was trying to understand women. And
yeah, well, just give up on that one.
well, that was 30 years of failure. But I have to tell a joke because it's always good to tell a joke,
Please
right?
tell a joke, yeah.
All right. So this guy's walking along the beach, in North Island, San Diego. And he sees this ancient Egyptian urn, this little lamp laying there on the beach. He picks it up and he rubs it a little bit, and out comes this 40-foot green genie. He stretches and looks around, and the guy's just stupefied and looking up at this giant green genie comes with this little bottle, right? Finally, Genie looks down at him and says, "You, young man, have rescued me from 5,000 years of being in this bottle, in this prison, and I am going to grant you any wish you want." The guy's obviously pretty taken back by the whole experience. He just can't believe it to start with, and he doesn't quite know what to say. So he says, sir, he says, "I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I'm afraid of flying. I want a land bridge from here to Hawaii." Well, the genie looks at him and says, "Are you nuts?" He says, "All the things that I could grant you, you want a land bridge?" I mean, he says, "Come on, be reasonable. Pick something easy, okay?" So the guy says, "Well, I always wanted to understand women." Genie says, "About that bridge, 2 lanes
Yeah,
of
right.
Yeah. So
go back to the bridge. So John, with the intent of sort of framing this out, what you said at the beginning was that the linear AI doesn't take into account the nuances of humanity and human thinking and the bumps and curves in the road. So you can't really account for the current AI models don't really account for the nuances in thought and humanity and consciousness and that sort of thing. Is it fair to say that what you're attempting to do here with this trading platform is to somehow account for those, to maximize the probability of success?
yes, the answer is yes. And there's kind of 2 parts to the answer, and it may be useful because our audience are people who have to make decisions about investment projects, and AI is like the hot topic out there, GPT, right? But there's a problem with GPT, and it's fabulous, and we're going to use it actually. One of my AI scientists has done 5 GPT projects, so he's pretty adept at it. But here's the key idea, and it's kind of a big idea too. Humans can only tell when someone is telling the truth at an important level. I mean, we have communications and we carry on about things all day long, but to really get to understanding whether someone's deceiving someone or not, we can only determine that 52 to 54% of the time. This is over thousands of studies. So the intelligence world's a big thing, and with forensics, it's a big thing, and with lie detection. So the average person can only take language and extract it at a high level, a high resolution, 52% of the time. Professional forensic people are at 54%. And what this means is all that data out there that large language models are using, pulling it off the internet, Wikipedia, et cetera, ultimately is 46 or 48% noise. Now, that's kind of a conflict because we know it's pretty cool and it does some neat stuff. But what it's really like when you're shooting, you don't miss your target shooting 45 degrees in another direction. You miss it by one click to the right or the left. It's that one click that'll kill you in the battlefield. So the problem with large language models is when it's applied to certain situations, it's mostly noise. Now, we know from a philosophical point of view, and from one of the areas that I threw myself into over the last few years was studying quantum mechanics, because it's a language that's very current. It translates archetypal philosophical concepts into current language. And even math, not regular arithmetic, but mathematics, calculus, and so forth, it also is not totally accurate philosophically. But language is really messy. We learn to deceive when we're still little kids, right? A baby learns if it cries, it gets milk, right? A girl learns if she bats her big browns or big blues, all of a sudden the guy's, taking her to dinner, right? I mean, it's a lot of noise is my point in the language. So when I was working in special operations, I had to extract the truth out of my target. I had to determine what, in fact, was really going on, not necessarily what they're telling me. Now, I'm going to stop that trajectory at this moment, but you get the idea. There's a lot of noise there. Now, this is why probably most of you have heard now that there's been a number of legal cases where attorneys used GPT, and it turned out to be a disaster. Actually, got thrown out of court, and even attorneys were held in contempt because it turned out to be nonsense, because the GPT was saying, "Oh, I got an idea." It comes up with all sorts of things, right? So my point is, it's not that it's not useful. It is useful, but it's not useful if you really have to get to a refined level of integrity in your data. That's the point. So what's happening now in the world of venture capital is everybody's thinking, "Wow, I'm going to sell a GPT deal, right? I got a deal for you, right?" It's a great tool, but the key is the business model, right? It's not, you don't build a business model around AI. You use AI to make a business model work. And what I want to get into in our presentation here is that what we did is I started with this wonderful idea philosophically about artificial intelligence, but when I really did my homework over the course of a couple of years, I realized what I just said. What we really want to use is AI. We want to use very simple algorithmic AI that's very predictable, that doesn't take endless years of optimization cycles, which winds up burning through the budget because a bunch of geeks are having fun with it. We want to use AI very particularly to solve a very particular problem. It was regular A&I, regular algorithms that the Kasparov used to beat chess, the best, or I'm sorry, excuse me, that the AI beat the best chess player in the world with. It was regular AI that was used to beat the best Go player in the world. So, and again, I'm not saying we don't want to go to a higher level with neural nets and genetic algorithms, but for starters, so Kairos 1 is going to be very simple application of ANI, very simple, straightforward algorithms that we know can be built in 6 months. And we're not going to wake up and have to say to the investor, well, you know, a year later, we haven't got there yet, right? So we wanted to create a business model that would use AI the way it should be used in a business. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yep. So let's start. So we have a baseline, and I'm going to try it, and you can correct me. Is what you're building is a trading methodology that is trading public equities or currency type transactions, and using a sophisticated AI to start with simple to maximize the probability of a high rate of return and create some protection on the downside. Is that fair?
That is fair. Allow me to elaborate, and that's a perfect opportunity to kind of define what Kairos neuropsychological predictive intermarket trading is. Now, this was really for the part 3, so I'm going to do it just briefly.
No, John, I just want to make sure we get people to a point where they know where we're starting and what we're talking about, because
Sure.
we need some baseline to actually keep the interest of the audience, to tell you the truth.
Sure, absolutely. So what I want to do, and I'm going to answer your question really briefly, because as you can see, that's really part 3. That's really the meat. That's the fun part. But what I faced with as you and I discussed before we started, the big issue here is convincing someone that this opportunity really is possible. And so I really had to address that. And that's what I do in my first part. I do a brief analysis of the investment industry.
Good idea. Yeah.
And the second part is then becomes, we're not talking about neural nets and you know, exotic AI or trading, you know, strategies. We're talking about a very basic business model, right? So I'll go through this sequence. The first thing that we really have to, I think, get our minds around is the fact that the whole concept of what market efficiency and risk to return, and of course diversification, what they meant 10 or 20 years ago is different today. The reality is that, now I'm going to give my simple example. It's nothing like an example to make a point. There's a guy named Jim Simmons, who probably most of you have heard of. He created the Renaissance Medallion Fund. Simmons earned 71.8% every year on the average for 20 years without a single losing year. His worst year was 37.5%. Well, my question is, why should anyone be happy being told that they're going to beat the S&P at 11 to 12%? Markets really aren't as efficient as we're told they are. So that's the crux of it. The second part of our presentation is I'm going to describe a business model, very simple business model. A business model has 3 parts. One, it has a product or service that you're selling. The second thing is a business model how it works and how you do things. The third is you have to have capital to do it. So what we did is broke down MTSG FinTech into a very simple business model. And And the simple concept is that private professional trading, this is not the 94 to 96% of all the people who buy programs online and quit in on the average 18 months. This is what private professional traders do. These are guys in the back office. These are quants in the back office. These are private professional companies like ourselves who work very hard at mastering a skill that really is the most prolific skill on the planet. This is not guesswork. So what we're looking at is that a $10 million investment, we're going to use somewhere around 3.5, 4, maybe a little more, to actually build Kairos 1, which I'll explain in a minute. We have some contingency in there for things that may happen, but the bulk of our capital we're going to use to trade with. Now, what happens here, by doing that, we don't have to go out in the market and sell this. And that's where the problems occur in startups. 8 to 9 out of all startups fail because they run out of capital. They run out of capital because the market changes, the competition changes. So I want to discuss that in some detail, because really what I think the audience is looking at here. Is this a good investment for me? The third part then is I want to get into the fun part for me, which is, what Kairos really is. So to go back and highlight the point, Jim Simmons earned 71.8% every single year for 20 years. And there's reasons why he did that. It's not magic. There was a fellow from the University of California, I've forgotten his name, who come out and said, well, something's wrong with Simmons. This can't be true. It's not possible, right? It's not possible because he's stuck in the paradigm that it's not possible. The reality is it's true. And the reality is that private professional traders are doing this all the time. The reality is that huge amounts of money are being left on the table, or they're winding up in someone's pocket. And it's a very simple reason. The simple reason is because, as Einstein said, the eighth wonder of the world is compounding. You need money to trade with. Big banks need money to trade with. So they go out, they sell the story. Listen, I got a deal for you. 11 to 12%. Wow, we're going to beat the S&P. But they are making money hand over fist. I guess it's Citadel. Ken Griffin. Now, I'm a big fan of Ken Griffin, by the way, so I'm not going to beat him up. I like Ken Griffin. I like his economics. He's a free market Adam Smith guy. Good guy. I like him. So I don't want to pick on him. But Ken stuffed $4 billion in his pocket and only paid all his millions of investors. Wow, I think $7.5 billion. Now, he deserved it. They had a great year. They beat everybody, except, of course, for Simmons, right? So the point is, these banks are making tons of money. And that's okay, but you're not making the money, right? The investor's not making the money. I mean, when Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase is willing to take the chance, take the risk to pay a fine of $920 billion for spoofing. Spoofing, as you all know, is basically cheating the market. They're basically lying to the market and taking all the profits. If they're willing to take that risk, how much money are they making? All right, now, I'm not a fan of Jamie Dimon, by the way. He's the guy who came out on Fox News and said, Americans shouldn't be allowed to own real estate, right? The government should own it. Big corporations should own it. And NGOs should own it, right? So I'm not a fan of Jamie Dimon. But my point is simply, there's a lot of money going someplace, and it's not going into your pocket or my pocket. And that is a reality that we're trying to address here, because our model is very simple. It's very simple. We have an investment member who, like us, is one of our partners. No dilutions, because we're never going to have to market to the public. We're never going to have to sell this because we don't have to raise money. And traders know that you trade other traders. So if I have a great secret here and one of you like the secret and you go out and build something, it doesn't hurt me, because in reality, you become a trader. If you have a better mousetrap, I'm trading you, right? You understand? So the point is, we don't have any competition. We don't have any marketing issues. All we have to do is have a good, solid budget going in. Okay. So, but I have to make a couple of quotes here because I went to trouble making this little chart, and it's worth thinking about. So diversification is a big story everybody talks about, what all the brokers talk about, right? Well, a guy I got to know, actually, Jim Rogers, who was George Soros's partner, his quote was about diversification. He says, diversification is something brokers came up with so they don't get sued. Warren Buffett said diversification is just protection against ignorance. When you incubate a company, classic incubation, this is not some kid out of school who has a website, says, oh, I'm an incubator, right? This is somebody who knows how to incubate a company. So classical incubators were NGOs and so forth. They have a success rate typically north of 90%, sometimes north of 95% starting companies. That means if they start 10 companies, 9 of them are going to be successful. In the VC world, when you start a company, 9 of them are going to fail. This is just, that's unacceptable. All right, it's a con. So my point is, there's huge amounts of profit being left on the table, and they're real. In a trading environment, and I think most everybody here understands trading is this huge activity, but it's also this stigma that trading is somehow guesswork, and people lose because a lot of people who aren't very good traders. But private professional traders don't lose money. They earn 1 to 3% on the average every day. There are other private professional companies who have a very particular style. Maybe it's an arbitrage, maybe it's a future style, maybe it's a Forex style, maybe it's an approach to trading, major bank moves. They're predictable and make a lot of money. We're not getting it. So our model is for Kairos 1, Kairos, and we'll get to what Kairos and time means, but Kairos 1 is very simple, very, very simple model. We take known existing strategies that work. Arbitrage works. Options work. Forex traders who have a technique, it works. So what happens with private traders, they have a technique, it works, and they make money. What the big banks do is they have back offices. One office does, or one department does, maybe options. Another option is particularly for arbitrage. Another option is for doing Forex commodities. Certain commodities are directly related to Forex, for instance. People have specialties. So our model is, and this I think is important, is to take these known strategies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then use very basic AI to extract data from the markets. This is not huge amounts of data from large language models where we're spending, some of these data farms are spending close to $1 million a day just running electricity and a few employees. This is just, as we started the conversation, this is just really good quality data feeds. $1.98 data feeds. But we're taking that data and we're putting it into our artificial intelligence. And what it has to do is sort that data. This it does really well. We don't need neural nets and so forth for that. This is very simple stuff.
Hey, John. So
yes, sir.
Is it a couple questions I think we should ask before we move on here, if it's okay with you?
Sure.
One, I've always been puzzled that every brokerage agreement I ever signed said that the bank can hypothecate my balance every night, and I don't participate on any of that upside. So they basically use my money in what I believe what you're saying in the back office trading. So I might have a bond portfolio with Goldman Sachs, and my brokerage agreement says they can take my balance and trade it and that's that, right? Is that an oversimplification of what you're talking about when you're saying that the big banks are trading and we're not participating in it?
I would say it's an example of their strategy. So what large institutional traders can't do is they can't be agile, because they're trading so much money. Their model to trade a whole lot of money and make smaller profits. That's their model. Smaller traders, their model is to be much more efficient and much more effective at trading and use less amount of money. And this is a simplification. So the whole model with the banking industry, and this is a cultural thing. This is not a criticism. It's not a financial concept, but is to get as much money in as possible from the world in various ways, whether it's checking accounts or from brokers, whether it's from family offices, whatever. Get as much money as they can get in there, and then use that money to make as much money as they can for themselves and pay, the outside party as little as possible. It's a simple model, right? So, oh boy, let's beat the S&P, right? Let's get 11.5. Whoa, we got 12.5 this year, right? So, and this has worked for a long time, and it actually made sense years ago because markets were a lot more inefficient then, right? So that's the model. That's one way they do it. It's why central banks are printing money like drunken sailors, right? So they can use that money, right? This is a fundamentally dangerous concept, right? And because we all, I think, are sophisticated enough to understand the problems of overprinting money and inflation and the damage it causes and how it destroys the integrities of markets. And this is a problem with high frequency trading, by the way. This is a danger there, different topic. But the point is that our goal is to trade our own money. This is why half of our capital raise is for trading. If we take $5 million and trade with it, and we only trade 20% of the portfolio on the average, and when I talk about the model in the last part, you'll see why we can really dramatically leverage this. That'll make $10 million the first year. That pays back our investor principal. At 2%, it's $100 million. I mean, leveraging, compounding is really where the profits are, right? And the big banks are using everybody else's money to do it. So does that answer the question?
Yes. And on some level may or may not apply, but the typical decision, critical thinking tree, decision tree for critical thinking and participating in an investment is, what are you doing? How long you've been doing it? What's your track record? What makes you think you can do it now? So I think we need to talk about that in terms of the audience would probably want to understand, okay, John, here's what you're doing seems to make sense or about to do, and so the typical questions are, okay, how much money have you traded so far? What's the performance? And those answers may be none, and we don't know yet, but I think we need to clear that up and let people know what, on what basis are you suggesting that you're going to be able to do this going forward?
That's I really I think you pinpointed the real issue here. Questions I would ask. So my challenge in presenting this is proof of product. So I'll have to tell a story. I was in Ukraine. I spent a lot of time in Ukraine and Russia. I'm sitting at my favorite cafe, working on my computer. And I hear a guy in the back behind me finessing some beautiful Ukrainian women. He's very well spoken. He's talking about economics and political so forth. So he's not a cheap guy looking for a hustle. He's a guy who's really trying to present himself as having a person that I have an integrity. I'm looking for a wife, right? So I'm enjoying the conversation. A girl gets up, goes to the bathroom. I try to look at me. Doesn't have any arms. He's eating his pizza off his plate like this. And all I can think of, I don't know who this guy is, but he's got audacity.
He's got game. Right.
I mean, he's got gonads the size of dumpsters, right? So we have a little chat, and the conversation was already interesting because his geopolitical interest in economics. So we hit it off. We turned out to be a trader. And so he says, I want to teach you to trade. So I said, okay. And so every night for a year, he was living in Sweden. He would get online and I would get online, and we would paper trade Forex. Peter, name was Peter Johansson. Peter was so good that he doubled our paper portfolio at least every 2 weeks. We'd look at a market. He'd say, "You see that price action there in the euro dollar." He said, "Look at that. You watch that. Okay, let's go to this time frame. Let's go to that time frame. Let's go to here. Da 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 da." He said, "Okay, see that? There's a trade. Okay, let's make a trade." Boom, pop in a trade. Set a stop loss. Set to take profit. Set the portfolio allocation, and boom, it would just take off. He did this month after month after month. And so finally I said, "Peter, why are we not making money?" Right? So I said, "I want to put some money in. Let's trade." So I put money in, and Peter managed to lose the whole thing in about 2 weeks. And being a neuropsychologist, I knew exactly what was happening, right? His brain went into fight or flight mode. He was being chased by invisible saber-toothed tigers, right? The central nervous system cut off glucose to his prefrontal cortex because it's too slow. It sent the blood to his arms, his legs, his muscles, his heart, and so forth. Changed his neurotransmitter cocktail. He made bad decisions. But what I saw very clearly was what was possible and why it didn't work. It was the neuropsychology that tripped up Peter. So I traded myself then. I practiced on paper, testing myself, and because you and I both know, meditation is a place where you study your mind, right? So I was able to study my mind, and I know what great Tibetan yogis can do and Zen masters and so forth. I was able to successfully paper trade 2.9% profits per day. Now, I wasn't thinking about selling this. I was just thinking about, what was possible. I just didn't want to trade all night from California. I figured maybe I'd move to a different time zone because it was killing me staying up all night. But I knew what was possible. So I come to this situation knowing what is possible and why it works and why AI can be used strategically, because it simply takes out the amygdala, the emotional aspect in the brain that triggers this fight or flight mechanism. So to answer your question, that's my first data point. My second data point is that I started studying traders. And this is where, like, there's a company out of Israel now that Morgan Stanley is using. The name escapes me. It'll come to me. They're earning 1 to 4% per day. And Morgan Stanley's using them, but they're not telling the public. They're using for the back office, right? So what I really, and you and I talked about this, what really my challenge is how to translate how this works without a proof of product. Proof of product here, and because our model is not something of just something you can do in an afternoon, we're going to spend 6 months with a very sophisticated AI team building this model that trades known strategies that work. That's Kairos 1. Kairos 2 expands on that and uses some neural nets that already are proven. They're used in large language models, but we won't use them there. We have limited data, which improves the efficacy. And then Kairos 3 will become a sophisticated model for using neural nets and so forth. Does that answer the question somewhat?
Yes. So the 6 months of building will be all tech build out?
Yeah. Just a lot of hard work. Just a lot of hard work programming. I got great guys on my AI team. Julian, he's doing a project for Peter Thiel now. He's done 5 companies. Everyone succeeded. That's a brilliant guy. You like him, actually. He actually meditates too, so we have a little common ground. So he understands how the mind works more than most people. So he's one of he's our chief architect, and we have Charlie Knezovich, who is the project manager for the CMS for their security, which is the largest distributed computer system in the world. So we have some really great people on our team.
CMS being the healthcare thing for the government?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's their troubleshooter guy for that. And so we have some great guys on our team, and they're used to managing people. And I think we all realized it. It's one thing to be a geek and be really clever. It's another thing to get the project done.
Yeah.
But Charlie's really good at getting a project done, and so is Julian, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I want to stay away from exotic optimization loops. We can do that later once we paid the investor back their $10 million investment, made them another $40 million, and we're all on cruise control.
So how does one how would you present an attribution to a potential investor? And by the way, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to get to a place where we can have conversations with people that are interested and can help you. So normally there's an attribution, right? And it would be the first time that somebody invested money in something that isn't proven, with the hope that it can be based on voting with the jockey and the team. So I'm not saying that's not possible. What I want to get at for the benefit of the group to have conversations with you is, aside from what we talked about already, and for example, you said there's 4 or 5 standard or known trading things those known trading things still have to be programmed. So that's part of what the money's going to be used for?
Yeah, the money's going to be used for, again, so because of this whole issue that you're wisely putting forward here, the issue is, if I was an investor, what would I want to have happen, right? And so I would look at this as strictly as a startup. Startup has a product, has a business model, and has capital. That's what a startup is. Why do some startups succeed and one startup's not, right? And so you have you're either looking for a capital growth investment or a capital preservation investment, right? So the first idea was in reality, they can be the same if you manage your risk correctly, And I give the example: if you're a NASA and they send a bucket of bolts to Mars, they don't send 10 hoping one of them will work. They do a really good job and send one, right? It goes hurtling through space, dodges asteroid belts, lands on a spinning ball of mud, picks up a bunch of interesting things, flies home, right? They did good intelligence, good analysis, and they managed the program. So what I really wanted to try to create was a business situation, a simple business model that an investor can say, okay, well, we're not inventing something new here. We're using proven things that work. We're taking out all the risk, because the risk in startups is the market's going to change, the competition is going to change, we're going to run out of money. That's why we all know companies fail. Well, because we don't have to market, and because we trade other traders, all that risk is off the table. So now I'm saying, okay, well, we have a business model where we have a proven activity, not something we have to invent. And we have a very simple business model where, for a startup, the risk is removed. And we have managed our capital wisely. And when we, when I talk to an investor per se, and we drill down, you'll see we have multiple levels of protection. If this doesn't happen, this happens. If this doesn't happen, then this happens, right? So it's like the NASA mission. We really thought it through and planned out how to manage that capital, make sure we get to the finish line, because we don't want to dilute the investor. I think this whole idea that investors should expect dilution is just poor business planning. It's poor capital management. So, but it's easy because we don't have that.
Yeah, a couple questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
We just ran out of time. What is and this slide here, what is HFT? High frequency trading. That's what that is.
High frequency trading, yeah.
All right. And so if you're trading other traders, one would argue that you could use their track record as an attribution of what you hope, or their combined track record, to achieve. Is that fair?
Let me address that, okay? Because we're running out of time. I get it. So let's just very quickly kind of fly through the trading model, okay? The biggest problem with trading is time. High frequency trading took over the institutional market because they simply eliminated it.
Yeah.
Time is the problem. And this is a neuropsychological phenomenon. Time in trading, more time, the more chaos. The more chaos, the more complexity. The more complexity, the more options. More options, the more need to create risk strategies to manage those options. So the high frequency trading guys just took it all out. But there's lots of problems with high frequency trading, which I don't want to get into. So it's not a good model for a private trader, although people are hustling it. The reality is it's a big money model, and they're very, very competitive, and they're trying to beat each other by using microwaves instead of radio waves and God knows what else, right? The other model is time-wise is long-term trading. This is what most traders do, because like Peter, they couldn't deal with the psychological stress that occurs in short-term trading, right? The money is made in short-term trading. If you use leverage, which makes Forex attractive, in a short-term window, you can make a lot of money by using leverage, right? And if you take out that psychological aspect, which regular AI does, then you don't have the problem. So the first thing is dealing with time. Now, we have a very interesting strategy to deal with time, and I'll just say it real quick, and it'll probably fly by without people kind of understanding it. In the neuropsychology of time, in time in the Kairos, which means time is potential, not the tick, tick, tick of time, we take the trade and we cut them into little small pieces, little overlapping small pieces. We spread them across multiple currencies, multiple equities, multiple commodities, cross arbitrage back and forth, all small trades, and we optimize each one of those. We can optimize them without using neural nets or complicated, philosophical concepts. That allows us, you can't do this as an individual, but the AI can do this. They can do it all day long. It can do 1,000 trades simultaneously, each one optimized. So each trade, we set the stop loss, we set the portfolio allocation, we set the take profits. It can optimize those and dramatically reduce risk. All right, simply by doing that, we can reduce risk and increase profits. But again, it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the Kairos concept. That's the intermarket concept, and the psychological thing. Well, we'll deal with that another time. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm fascinated by all this, John. You and I have had several conversations about this, and aside from it being super interesting, what is clear is we need more time to discuss it with the group, because we have to let everybody go now. So let's think about maybe doing this again. But in the meantime, I'll make sure that, the folks that RSVP today and the people that came on can connect with you directly, so you can have that, one-on-one with them, which would be, that's the objective. So if that's okay with you,
That's fabulous.
we'll go ahead and wrap it up now, but make sure that everybody gets in touch. I really appreciate you doing this, John. And we owe each other a separate phone conversation about other topics.
Okay, good. I look forward to that as well. Yeah. Thank you, Arthur, and thank you for really interacting a lot with me on this, because it helps, right? I mean, it's just so much to this. There's so much depth. I could take any one of these aspects of Kairos and talk about it for the next 4 hours, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's that's not fun for anybody except me. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank everybody for taking the time. And man, I love questions. I love challenges. So really feel free to roll up your sleeves and make the hair on your back and neck stand up, and let me know why you don't like the idea. And I love the challenge. So thank you all. Thank you so much. And thank you, Arthur. I really appreciate it.
You're super welcome. Yeah, till next time. And as I always say, thank you all for sharing with us the only thing you can't make more of, and that's your time. Although John and I are going to think about doing that. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Cheers. Bye.